If you've been considering starting a podcast to grow your personal brand, to expand your thought leadership, look no more for more resources because here I'm going to have your complete guide. Well, this is part one, and today we're covering your message, your equipment and setup, and your content. So let's go straight to the chase because this is a good one. Do you want to be seen as the go-to in your industry, get more sales, easily attract new opportunities, but feel overlooked online? If so, you are in the right place. Hey, I'm Eugenia, but you can call me E. I'm a marketing strategist, a wife, and a new mom. I learned the secret of how to be seen as an authority and have people think of you for new opportunities and more clients. If you're ready to get clear on what makes your personal brand unique, build a magnetic presence online, and get more eyes on your business, this is your next move. So let me tell you, before we start this episode, for this new podcast that you're about to start, you need to be able to talk about yourself with confidence, with clarity, and with a lot of conviction. You need to help your audience understand you. And sometimes it's hard to say the right things, the right words, because we have so many things to say about ourselves. We're a little bit confused about our positioning. So for that, I created a free bio builder. That's a series of questions and AI prompts that you can use to help clarify your positioning and the foundation that's going to help you write your bio, your about section on your website. It is a wonderful resource. It's completely free and it's going to be the perfect complement to today's episode. You can get it for free at clearbiobuilder.com. That's clearbiobuilder.com. I've been in the podcast industry one way or another for 8 years. And 4 of those years were as a podcast manager. Before becoming a podcast manager, I had tried podcasting and I loved it. I had 2 podcasts, one of the first podcasts in Spanish. It was wonderful, but it was so much work and I hadn't seen the traction that I wanted. As a podcast manager, though, I was wildly successful. I was able to then help my clients grow their podcasts. So I kind of found my groove with podcasting and I was okay with it. I thought, maybe I am not the person meant to be up front in front of the microphone. Maybe I'm the person that's better, behind the scenes. And I was fine with it. But in the back of my mind, I always had this voice saying, like, what if I had a podcast? And I would secretly plan my podcast all those 4 years. Like, what would I talk about? How would I grow it? How did I envision my cover art? Like, I had so many ideas. And that was, just like a fun thing to think about until 2023. That year, I decided that it was time to launch my own podcast. And I followed the process I had created for my clients. And I added some new experiments, fun things that I had just created in my mind and I had been dying to try. And I launched my podcast. And with a small list of 50 people and under 2,000 Instagram followers, my podcast launched and I reached number 43 on Apple Podcasts. And the podcast was ranking in the top 10 of several countries in Latin America for weeks. It has now reached 75 countries, almost 700 cities. Like, talk about the impact of your message and your mission. It is very, very inspiring. And business-wise, of course, it has allowed me to connect with dream clients who get to learn about my worldview before working with me. So this is the process I am bringing to you today. And I want to give you a quick overall view of podcasting because we can look at podcasting from 2 different angles. You can look at a podcast as a media company or as a part of a funnel or a path to get clients. So if you want to run your podcast as a media company, that means that the podcast is the product and you are monetizing it through ads. So you need to grow your audience because basically you have this kind of influencer model where you need X amount of downloads and the size of your audience matters a lot. You need very big numbers because those sponsors, they pay by downloads and they pay in cents per download. So you really need up to tens of thousands of downloads to make this business model really successful. If that's the model you're going for, that's wonderful. I have seen podcasts being the product. I have seen them work. And for sure, this episode will be a good guide to help you get started. But the content strategy and the marketing strategy and the production, they need to be a bit different than what I'm teaching today, because for that model, you need a lot of volume. And to do that, you need to have a specific type of content. You need thousands of repeat downloads. You need a very high production value. And that's not what we are discussing today. What we are discussing today is a podcast that's going to help you connect with your audience, help you grow your personal brand, and ultimately grow your business. So yes, we are monetizing the podcast either way, but monetizing through the first model I just mentioned, where it's more of a media company, requires tens of thousands of downloads. It's a different game versus a podcast for personal brands and for businesses. You don't require as many downloads to monetize it and to see incredible results for your brand. And in reality, you can get incredible results. You can build incredible connections without needing tens of thousands of downloads on your podcast. So with that said, I want to reinforce that your personal brand needs long-form content, period, and the end. You need to have long-form content. And podcast is such a wonderful way to get that content and then in time repurpose it into other platforms like YouTube, newsletter, or blog. Of course, always tweak it. I never recommend that you just reuse the exact same content in a different platform, but you do need to have some type of platform where your ideas are expanded, where people can really understand what you are all about, how you think, how you process. So this guide is what you need if you want to start a podcast for your personal brand that's going to grow your reach, build your audience, and help you monetize your personal brand. This is part 1, and we're talking about message, equipment, and content. Then next episode, we're going to talk about launch, like launching your podcast, making it rank, the workflow, and grow. So stay tuned for that. First, define your message, define your audience. And with a podcast, you need to be hyper specific with a podcast for this personal brand. I was just listening to an interview with Natalie Barbu. She's the founder of Rela. She's also a content creator. I just love the business she's built. And Rela is a platform for social media managers to help them plan and get a content approval and post. And it's a really good platform. And they've had a very interesting journey. And she said that for the first couple of years, they were actually building an app for influencers that also would work for marketing teams, that would also work for social media managers. Basically, anyone who was on social media, they would build features for them. And having that broad net that, you would think, oh, let me just be for everyone. Let me just build this product for, anything on social media. Actually, that cost them money to the point where they were like 3 months away from closing their doors. Like, it was such an expensive mistake. Instead, you want a very specific audience that has a very specific problem and a very specific desire. So the problem is, what is the problem that you're going to solve for them? Like, what's standing in the way of their goals? And this problem has to be in their own words. Like, what is their main struggle? And you might know that the root problem is actually different than what they think they want. I see this a lot with coaches working in like mindset and more like mind related areas, where they say, oh, the issue is identity, but what they say they want is a good relationship. So yes, they need to work on their identity, and for sure, identity is the root of having good relationships, but what they're saying they want is a good relationship. So you want to create a podcast around their perceived problems and their perceived desires, because that's what they're going to search for, and that's how your podcast grows organically. Your podcast grows organically through different methods, and we're going to talk about it on the next episode. But one of them is search engine optimization, making sure that your titles are optimized for what people are searching for. And then you can use what they're searching for, and then in the content, you deliver your methodology, you deliver your perspectives. Like, you don't have to be cookie cutter in the way you create your content, but in your titles, it is very important that the titles are written in a way that reflects what they want or what they're struggling with. So in the sense of what they want, that's their desires. That's something else that you need to identify. That is the other face of the problem coin, right? You have problems on one side and then you have desires on the other side. Basically, if they have problems, it's because those problems are obstacles standing in the way of achieving something else. So what do they want? What do they dream of? What's their goal? You need to identify those desires. Why? Because having a podcast that's specifically for someone that's solving a specific problem and meeting a specific desire is going to really help your person, your audience, know that this podcast is for them whenever they search the term that's in their minds. They are not going to have to wonder if this really is for them or this is too confusing or you're speaking about too many things. So how can you do this? How can you define your audience? You first can do market research to understand what's in their main perceived problem in their own words. There are so many resources. I'm sure you can ask ChatGPT to help you come up with a couple of questions. These market research calls, they don't have to last more than 15 minutes really. And you just want to understand what is it that they want? Why do they want that thing? What's standing in their way? What would be their dream reality? Like, you want to understand what they're saying and then use those words to create the titles for your content and to kind of guide the content for your podcast. And then go listen to my episode on how to get clear in your message because it will help you so much here. It's going to be linked in the show notes, but it really takes you step by step on how to get clear on all these elements. I go in way more detail. So now that you have your message, then you need your equipment and your setup because quality is so important with a podcast. There was a day, probably 5-8 years ago, where you could record your podcast from your iPhone's voice memo and that was fine. And today's not so much the case. Like, you could record it, but you would have to attach a very good microphone to your phone if that's what you wanted, because your podcast is a product at the end of the day. Like, people are paying you with their time. So having good audio quality is giving your audience a good experience. So you can get a really good microphone. Again, there are so many good options, different price ranges. I have the Rode PodMic. It's so good. It is fantastic. I have used it for so long. But lately, because with my baby being so little, I only have time to record just like in between naps. So I need something that's very quick. So I actually record with an amazing lapel microphone, which is those little microphones that you attach to your t-shirt. And then I attach it to my t-shirt, and then it has a hook for my phone and for my laptop, and it's very mobile, so I can record from anywhere. This is a microphone that my brother and my sister-in-law gave me for Christmas, and when I saw it, I thought that I didn't need it, but then I started trying it for the podcast, and it was incredible. The brand is Boya, Boya. It's very simple. It's very mobile. So if you need to record from different places, this is a great option to keep it very consistent, like consistently good quality. So then after recording, this is like the secret sauce, to be honest, because I record usually in Audacity. That's a free software. You can use it both in Mac or Windows. Download it for free. Look up a YouTube tutorial. Super simple to use. And then that audio, after I recorded, I exported as a WAV. So meaning like the highest quality possible. Don't export it as an MP3 yet. And when you export it, you're going to see the format. So MP3 is basically as you would have, like a format is PDF. And for images, you have PNGs. And then you also have JPEGs. Like, you have different formats for pictures, for videos, you'll have different formats. So for audio, export it as a WAV. That's a WAV file. That's going to be like the best quality. And the way you process that audio, that is the secret sauce to really improve it. There are so many options. I recommend Adobe Podcast. They have a free version at the time of this recording. That's actually really wonderful. I use the paid version, so I'm not sure where the free version ends as of right now, but I know that you can enhance the audio on the free version, so that's amazing. Like, you upload your audio and they improve the quality. It's like applying an Instagram filter, but to the audio, and that makes the quality so much better. And then to edit it, there's two options. There's text-based editing, which you can have with Adobe Podcast. I don't use text editing or text-based editing, which means that you have the transcript and then you choose the words you want to delete. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. The most popular text-based editor is Descript, Descript. And it is great because it also works for video. So probably that's something you want to look into. And I've used it to edit in the past. It was so helpful. And when I was coaching people in podcasting, like on one-on-one sessions, I would actually recommend that for editing. But today for me, it takes a little bit longer because I have to read the full transcript. And after all of these years, I found a faster method that works for me. And that is when I record, if I make a mistake, I make like a long, like 5 to 10 second pause. So then when I'm editing, so let's say I go to Adobe Podcast, I fix my audio, I download that audio, I re-upload it to Audacity. I know it sounds like too many steps, but promise, this is very fast. I re-upload it, and then there I have a visual of like the sound wave. And whenever you're quiet, you're going to see a blank space. And I wish I had like a video to demonstrate it for you. But basically, if you make a pause and you're visually editing, you are going to see that there's like a space. And that tells you that you made a mistake. And you can just go to that specific spot, delete the mistake, and make everything sound super smooth. So to me, I don't listen to the whole episode because that would take too long. I actually don't recommend that you listen to the whole thing because I don't recommend people spend too long producing their podcast because you have other things to do for your business probably. So just focus on removing the mistakes. The quality is way more important than perfect speech where you don't say any you don't say any ums. Of course, you want to get better. So I do recommend you listen to your podcast after, but do not be too worried about individual mistakes. Like the mistakes, the reasons why I stop is if I either take too long to get to the point of an idea and I'm like, okay, you just lost track of it, restart. Or if I mispronounce something. For example, I just said the number when I was talking about MP3. I had to actually pause there like 3 times because I kept saying MP3 instead of 3. And that happens, obviously. English is not my first language, so my accent sometimes betrays me and I do have some mispronunciations. So whenever I catch something like that, I stop and I just re-record that section, but it's so fast. So this podcast, like from writing the outline to like publishing, it takes me like probably an hour and a half to 2 hours, everything, show notes, the whole thing. So then you add your intro, your outro, the whole thing. You can edit it. I like to edit to export as a WAV, like WAV again, because it keeps such a good quality. But a lot of people export as MP3. That lowers the quality a bit. And those podcasts, I've had clients that do that, and their podcasts work great. The thing is that it just takes less space in your like Google Drive, so they rather have that so they can keep the audios. Maybe a little bit more irresponsible, so I really don't save all my audios. That's the truth. So why do we want to do all these things? Because user experience is so important. That is part of your personal brand. The goal here is not to look fancy or to flex that you use XYZ microphone or to look fancy on videos. The goal is to make your audience experience the best it can be, giving them great quality, volume they can hear anywhere. Maybe you have to adjust the volume a little bit. You can do that in Audacity as well. You want to make sure that people can hear it, whether they are in the subway, whether they are out taking a walk at a busy coffee shop. Like, I get so bothered when I'm at a coffee shop and I cannot listen to a podcast or I cannot hear because it's so quiet. Like, it's like a perfect like background sound, but it just doesn't work in loud environments. It's a pet peeve I have. So go a little bit higher than you would normally do because you want to make sure that the volume is good. giving them consistent audio, both in terms of like when can they expect a new episode, and also the sound should be consistently good. And then point C, which is the content, forget about the whole write 30 ideas thing that used to be very popular with content. With a podcast for personal brand, you want to say the same core ideas from 1,000 different angles. Here, we are not trying to come up with a million ideas. We're trying to come up with a million angles. People need to hear the same things over and over and over. Because the job with a podcast is not to speak about, these million things, but to kind of like indoctrinate people into your methodology, to your way of thinking. And once you have identified those problems and those desires from your message, you can group everything in 3 types of content that you will create on your podcast. You can call them pillars, but I don't want you to be too rigid about it. So you can have like a balance in the type of content that you create. So for me, when I launched my podcast, my pillars were mindset, and that was helping my audience get out of their head so they could start showing up online. Tactics, so giving them practical, easy to follow strategies she could implement ASAP, and then systems, so helping her make sure this was sustainable, routines, marketing rhythms, the whole tools, the whole thing. So that's kind of like the 3 types of content, those pillars that I want you to create for your content. And then start with a weekly episode. I personally like episodes under 20 minutes. Today is going to be a little bit longer because I am creating a very specific episode. But for the most part, my episodes are under 20 minutes, and they perform great for new audiences because if you're finding a new podcast to solve a specific problem, usually you're not going to go and just listen to a 2-hour episode. And also those very long episodes are very hard to create because you want to make sure that you are staying on topic, and you have to be very good if you're doing a solo episode for 40 minutes. And I know people love listening to very long episodes, but I rarely listen to very long episodes because my focus is not that good. I find that most podcasters lose focus, even in interview podcasts. Like there's a point halfway through the big chunk in the middle of the podcast where I'm just like, please land the plane. Where are you going with this? But if you like long episodes and if you feel like you can make every minute of that hour long episode good and valuable, then please go ahead. But for the most part, I would recommend staying under 20 minutes. Please, please, please don't fill your podcast with fluff and rambling and a 10-minute story that doesn't have anything to do with the episode. Can you talk for 2 minutes on the latest on the Real Housewives? Sure, if that's part of your brand, if that makes sense, you can do it for a minute or 2. Like, don't give people a 20-minute episode where for 15 minutes you're talking about something else. Remember, user experience needs to be top of mind, which is why one of my favorite interview podcasts is The Skinny Confidential, because they skip the whole, tell me about yourself, tell me about your childhood. Like, they go straight to the point. So all that to say, keep their audience experience top of mind, give them a quick win, hook them on early. And that's why an outline is so important. I don't care for how long you've been podcasting, but never neglect your outline before recording an episode. And I've been doing this for years. I was a podcast manager. I've listened to a lot of podcasts. When someone doesn't have an outline, it shows. It shows their ideas are not as concrete. You can tell that they're struggling to find their footing in the middle of the episode. So please don't spend 4 hours writing a single outline either. Write and produce fast. But I do want you to spend time thinking, how am I going to articulate this information in a way that actually answers the premise of the title? Write fast, produce fast, and then listen to the episode after. That way you can adjust for the next one. Like, okay, I didn't get to the point fast enough, or my examples were not as good, or like you start noticing patterns. But I don't like the whole record and re-record because it just takes too long. Maybe if you've never done any type of public speaking, like this is your very first time, maybe you can do that. But even then, I would start with just shorter episodes and let your voice mature, because that's how you prepare and practice to become a better communicator. And lastly, I had to talk about interviews versus not interviews, because that's something that comes up a lot. If you are building a personal brand and you're not using your podcast for networking purposes, which a lot of people do, and that's a very valid strategy. If you're using this because you want to grow your personal brand, you want to grow your client base, your leads, you need to have a good body of work with solo episodes so people get used to you. That doesn't mean that you're never going to have guests. And the right guest can definitely give your podcast a boost. Actually, one of my most listened podcasts in this whole podcast is an episode I did with an expert on SEO, search engine optimization. But for the first 2 months, I for sure wouldn't have a guest. And then I wouldn't do more than one monthly guest episodes unless you are exploring a specific topic. Let's say I was doing a series on launching a product. So I did a whole series on launching. So I'm going to have 3 launch experts that I know talk about launching from different angles. Or maybe you need to take a little break or slow down from the podcast for a strategic reason and you cannot spend time preparing outlines and you just have more money to put into editing and post-production and those things. So maybe then it makes sense to have more guests. But I've been podcasting for almost 3 years and I've had less than 10 guest episodes. I am now considering having more because at this point I get pitched, some really good people are pitching me, and I know that a lot of them will add tremendous value. So I want to make sure I have a guest a month, but I for sure at first didn't go out of my way to find guests and just elevate other voices because I needed to build my own brand and practice my own voice in the beginning. So with this whole content thing, it's important that you remember, if you want to grow your personal brand and your business, your topic needs to be clear. It needs to be predictable. If I'm listening every single week, I don't want to be wondering what I'm going to get next week. I don't want to be listening about email marketing one week and then the next week, how to optimize your hormones for IVF. No, I need you to stay consistent within topic. Podcasting is really the way of showing your thought leadership. So don't dilute it with too many voices at first. Allow yourself to go deep on your perspectives and ideas. This is going to be such an amazing personal growth exercise for you. So use it, go all in. And also stay consistent with your content. This is so important because in the beginning, your focus needs to be on publishing weekly episodes. If you don't have time, then do shorter episodes. Get a lapel microphone, truly, that you can attach to your blouse, attach to your phone, and record with that external microphone, get some better quality. There are so many ways to make it happen. Keep the good quality, but do not neglect having that consistency and strategically planned episodes. Do not leave podcasting for when you have time, because if you do that, you're going to stop eventually because you're going to get busy. And whenever you restart after a break, it's going to be basically starting from scratch. It's brutal. So I recommend that you stay very, very consistent. So to recap, you first need to get clear on your message. Very clear person, very clear problem and desire. Then plan your equipment and setup. It's okay that it sounds a little overwhelming. Just practice. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can strive for excellence, of course, but don't get stopped if it's not perfect. And then your content, which is arguably the most important part of your podcast. Don't try to find 30 ideas. Find the topics and the titles that resonate with the words and the problems and the desires your audience is searching for. And then go deep with your ideas and say the same thing over and over. It's okay. Just find different angles, different perspectives. That's going to really cement your authority, and that will move people forward to wanting to work with you. Next week, stay tuned because we are going to talk about launching your podcast, having a very healthy, no hustle workflow, and growing your podcast once you launch. So stay tuned. Remember to download your free bio builder. It's going to be the perfect complement to this podcast. So go to clearbiobuilder.com. It's going to give you so much clarity in your podcasting process. And you can always go to Instagram. Let me know if you have any questions. Happy to chat through there. I see you back here for episode 2. Until then, take care. I'm rooting for you. Un beso. I hope you loved today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and send it to someone who's ready to be seen as the go-to in their industry? Also, please leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I love reading your comments. They remind me of those little notes you would send your friends in high school, you know? Okay, see you back here soon with the next episode. Un beso.